Howdy folks, this is Aarsh. Welcome to the fourth episode in the series. Today we are going to talk about adding front-end user interface to our application from scratch. To add the front end to your application using something called view resolvers, Apache Tiles, JavaServer Pages, or JSP, etc., there are many options. SpringBoot supports FreeMarker templates, Groovy Templates, and Thymeleaf via AutoConfiguration as the first-class citizens. As the name suggests, we would not need to do a whole lot to get going with one of these. In this video, we would be looking at Thymeleaf. I find it easy to use and feature-rich at the same time. Thymeleaf is mostly HTML, and then we will talk about web jars and how to add branding to our web application using responsive web design. Alright, let's dive right in. First, let's try to build our application and run it in Docker. I'm going to run two commands back to back. Here, I'm simply making sure that I can still run the Maven build to generate Docker image and deploy it to Docker Compose. Meanwhile, let's first inspect few changes I've made. Since our last demo, I have added new entities in our database schema. I have updated my seed data script to match the new schema. And you can see a little bit more data access objects, models in the entities package, and services to match the updated database schema. Now, the way I see it, we have three options to add the front-end web app from architecture perspective. A. Pure MVC application. B. RESTful Web API-driven client-side MV* single-page application using, let's say, AngularJS, and C. Hybrid MVC and Web API application. Each approach has its own pros and cons, so please do take your time before you make your choice, or ask your questions in the comment section down below. In the demo, I would go for option C to cover both. Nevertheless, in our previous episode, we saw how to create an API controller. Note that here I have one API controller and 0 MVC controllers so far, which means when our application is running, we should be able to view the raw JSON response from the REST API controller. But if we go to one of the HTTP GET endpoints, that's fine. But otherwise, since we do not have our MVC controller or the views in place, we would get a 404 error message because at this point our application does not know how to serve a web page as we have not specified the routing or the controllers just yet. Let's check real quick if our Maven build succeeded. Alright, looks like Docker is doing its thing. Let's navigate to localhost 8081. As expected, we see the error page. Now let's see the API at API persons. And I see in our case, API is sending me a list of people. Our goal essentially is to display these records in a well-organized Thymeleaf template. If I had taken route B, let's say if my AngularJS application is configured properly, I think I would be done in 5 minutes. I think I might make a new video for it sometime. But our goal here is to learn MVC. Let's stop Docker app, and we will start by configuring our project and then adding front end to our web app. I would just run Docker Compose down. Now, Thymeleaf being the first-class citizen, all that we need to do is to add Maven Dependency in pom.xml. Now, by default, SpringBoot looks at the views to be located in resources/templates directory. If you prefer to put your view files in, let's say, web app, web.inf, that might be possible as far as you configure it somewhere in your SpringBoot app. But for me, I'm okay with the default location under resources/templates directory. It makes sense to me. Let's start with MVC controller, right? So I prefer to keep my MVC and API controllers in separate packages. I prefer to use prefix API for my API URI paths. Just a personal test. Let's create a package called controllers. And then we want to create a class, just a simple Java class, and let's call it person controller. First, we will tell Java that this is a Spring Boot controller. Being a full-stack .NET developer for almost a decade, I follow the convention to name my methods same as template file. I would create index method to list all the patients. I would just add some simple trace message to my console, and I'll return a string. More on this later. Now I need to map this to a path for my path and routing mapping. So I would say get mapping because I'm going to do get request. I can map this to a root, so I would just say /, or I can map this method to person/index, or maybe I want to map it to both. So the way I can do it is I would add a value attribute and I would list all the paths I want to map it to. So root and /person/index. Now, because I'm returning person index, which means that this particular controller is going to look for a view file in resources, templates, person folder in a file called index.html. So let's go ahead and create that. So I have my index.html and let's add some HTML to it. I would add some title. And I would add some random message in the body section. Now, I'm not ready to deploy this application to Docker just yet. So what I'm going to do is, instead of standing up my entire Docker Compose environment, I'm going to selectively only run Docker Compose up and DB so that it will only start my MySQL server, not the web server. So I can go back to my IDE and I can start and stop debugging, and I can develop my application until I'm ready to deploy my application to Docker. It might just save me a whole lot of time to just having to start and stop my application every time I want to make a change. By the way, I also made a blog post, and I'll put a link to that in the description below to make this even faster, so that if you make a change and it automatically gets detected, and Spring Boot would automatically refresh your HTML or Java files as soon as you rebuild it. HTML file changes are automatically detected, so you don't even need to rebuild. It looks like our MySQL server is almost up, and I would now go ahead and run my application. So now, once the application loads, I should be able to still access my API, and if I go back to my root page, I should see a message that says we want to list all patients here. Let's verify that. So there is my API, and if I refresh, as expected, I see the message, and the title of the window also matches all patients. Alright, let's go ahead and stop this application now. Next, let's see how we can load data from the API. For a quick demonstration, I'm going to use jQuery. That way we would add the front-end dependencies is by adding them as web jars. To do just that, let's pop open, you guessed it, pom.xml. The idea of web jars and how we can use them is quite similar to the standard jar files we generally use for other dependencies. I have here added some standard files or libraries like jQuery, Jquery Validation, Bootstrap, Toaster for toast notification, etc. If you want to use a website to help you with this, you can refer to mvnrepository.com to find your own Maven dependencies. Next, we will set up some basic master template for branding, etc. so that we do not have to duplicate our HTML markup code. For that, let's create a folder called fragments, Beneath that, let's create another file called header.html. This file would have reference to our web jars we just added, plus it would also have the HTML markup to define the navigation bar up top, which would be consistently reused throughout our application. You can even add your footer or things like sorts of that nature in this file, or maybe in different file under this folder, and you can refer it accordingly. I'm just going ahead and updating my meta tag to be a little bit more specific, and I would add a reference to my CSS files. I like to refer my CSS files up top and JavaScript files towards the bottom. I think that it improvises the performance so that the web page would render first and then it would go ahead and download the JavaScript file simultaneously, rather than JavaScript files to be downloaded before the page gets rendered. It serves the whole application a little bit faster from the user experience perspective. So I'm here referencing my Bootstrap CSS file. I'm using the Bootswatch for it, just a flatly theme of Bootstrap 3, and I'm also adding toaster.css. Next thing I need to do is I need to reuse the th reference. Now the trick here is very subtle, so please pay some close attention to this. Here I'm going to add an attribute th:fragment and give it a name. I'm going to add 2 or 3 such sections, if you will. Next thing I need to do is for this th custom tag, I need to add a namespace. It should be xmlns:/th, and I'm going to refer thymeleaf.org in there. Actually, I need to move it to HTML tag. So I'm going to move this from doc type tag to HTML tag. So I have one section ready. I'll just make sure that my double quotes have ended correctly. So I would call my first section head, but I think you can use any arbitrary name. What we are going to do here is just reference my CSS files, as you can see. And I'm going to add some more subsequent sections here. The next section I'm going to add is header. Before that, this being a Bootstrap application now, I will just add a div with class container. So this section actually would contain the navigation menu, my website brand logo, etc. I want to give it just an arbitrary name, header, and then add some HTML code to it, just like so. And now I have my place to add my Bootstrap menu. Finally, I would add a scripts section to actually refer to my JavaScript libraries. And just like previous two sections, I would say th::fragment, and I would call it scripts. And scripts type text/JavaScript, and src would be empty. I generally mostly rely on my IDE's IntelliSense feature to autocomplete my path, which I find quite handy, but I'm not sure why it's not working currently. I must be doing something wrong here. So I have added my jQuery. Next, I'm going to try to add my Bootstrap. Actually, I think I know what's wrong. Let me go ahead and fix it. The scripts should not be plural, it should be singular. Let me go back and fix that in my expression, and there we go. Now I see my IntelliSense. So web jars, jQuery, my Bootstrap, Toaster. Toaster is one of the very good libraries I like to use for quick notifications, and there are many ways you can configure it. It would just show up notifications and they would just go away. I also like to use Jquery Validation for some good old validation rules on the client side. And there are two JavaScript libraries I like to refer. First file is jQuery validate main.js, the main file, and the other is additional methods.main.js. I think that's about it. Let's go back to index.html view template, and we need to go ahead and refer the sections we just added to our fragment slash header.html. So I'm going to say th block th colon include double quotes fragment slash header and double colon space head. So it just basically points to my head section that I defined earlier. Again, these are the same arbitrary names and they should match. Notice that I have to use some funky structure here. I have to use /* for Thymeleaf template to know that I'm trying to refer the sections from my fragments. So I have added header, and I'll quickly change this to scripts, and that should do what I think it should do, and be just to load and refer to this original sections, header and scripts. Now I'm just going to add a quick comment here. Bootstrap navigation top menu starts and ends. Because this Bootstrap navigation menu generally has a big chunk of code, I like to know when my big line of code ends and starts and what it does, so it just increased readability just for myself. I just added the code from my snippet, and that should give me the Bootstrap menu in a responsive design. Let's go ahead and run this application and see how it looks. Alright, my application started in 7.991 seconds. Let's switch to browser and refresh, and I see error. I think I know what it is. I need to use fragments, plural, not singular, I guess. Just making sure. I think that's it. If you guys noticed, I like to, I'm here referring my CSS up top. Then I'm referring my branding structure, and at the very end of the document, after the body tag ends, I'm referring to my JavaScript files for the same reason I mentioned earlier. Let's go ahead and try to run this app one more time. All right. And if you see in my network tab in my dev tools down below, I see all my files. I have my CSS files and then my JavaScript files loaded. And I have HTTP 200 status, which is a good sign. So that means that all my script files and CSS style sheets are loading as expected. Now, let's just say that we wanted to list all the people in a table using a RESTful API endpoint that we already have. We'll start with the markup and then delve into the JavaScript. Let's take baby steps here. So I have added a table, and then I'm going to add the script section. So I just need to add some JavaScript here. So using jQuery on page load, let's for now make sure that our jQuery loads as expected, and let's do a simple prompt. And refresh should give me a prompt. Here it is, page load test. So I know my jQuery works and I can move forward. So now I'm going to go ahead and add a function. I would call it load patients. And I want to call it on my page load event. So I'm calling it here on line number 26 or 27. Let's rerun the app. And as you can see on line number 42, I'm basically just dumping the output. I'm printing the URL. I'm using standard $.get JSON call, and I have done and fail callbacks. I'm trying to see if I can switch to presentation mode just so you guys can see it better. I'm trying to bring back my product structure view. I think it was just called project view. Okay, I would exit the full screen and get rid of the structure view. All right. Here is my prompt. If I switch to console tab, here is my array that I'm dumping to my console. And I'm getting all the same data that I saw earlier from my API call. I have my first name, last name, and I have my table headers. So let's keep moving. Now I'm going to add a function called show patients. It would just basically take the JavaScript array and it would iterate through that and add the formatted strings of the HTML and append to my HTML table using selectors. Let's run the app again. Let's refresh. And voila, I have a list of all the patients that are person that match to what I am getting from my API. I have also added some fake buttons just to give you the idea and look and feel. And let's make it a little bit better. I'm going to add a little bit more HTML and JavaScript just to add an additional filter feature. So I can just filter through the list of all the patients I've got. Let me do it quick. I'm going to add my scripts, and I'll make sure that my code is reformatted. I'm going to format the code. There we go. I'll run the app. As you can see, it's a simple JavaScript code. I have the toggle filter function, and there we go. There is my toaster. If I click on the funnel icon there, it would basically do a filtering for me. I'm just hovering over my table, and let's search for, and we see that our results being filtered. I'll click on it again to reset the view. There you have it, a full-blown Spring Boot application with Spring MVC and RESTful Web API. I hope this video series was helpful to you all. Please hit subscribe button or like the video, and do feel free to let me know what would you like to see next. Thanks.